Hey guys, Amrita here. I found the perfect place to film today's episode. I'm in a beautiful lake area. I'm surrounded by it's really secluded. Like I feel like I'm in my own little private studio to record this, and it just feels like the right place for this conversation. So, I was a very different person over a decade ago. I was actually, I would say, an atheist. And I had lost faith in a higher power. I had lost faith in God. I was a very depressed person. I was a very negative person. I was not in a good place. And to me, I actually think there's a link between atheism and depression. I truly believe that. And I believe that because human beings are not just human beings. We are spiritual energies wrapped up in a physical body. So when we say, I don't believe in God, we're cutting off our connection to our higher selves. And whenever we do that, life feels chaotic and painful. So that's what I was doing back then. I was cutting off my connection to my higher self. I was an atheist. I didn't believe in anything. I was really deep into depression. And my depression got worse and worse and worse. And as it got worse and worse and worse, there is one thing that I remember thinking, right? So like when you're depressed, your mind kind of takes on a life of its own. It goes to a very negative place. It becomes like, how do you say this? It's like negativity becomes an addiction, and you spiral and spiral and spiral and spiral, and it becomes almost uncontrollable. Like you just wake up in the morning and it's just, you feel heavy and you feel horrible, and it was the worst. But even as I was going through the worst of my depression, I remember thinking, how come I'm aware of the fact that I'm depressed? Like, what does that mean? Like, how come I'm aware? How come I'm able to observe myself being depressed? If I'm able to observe something, that means I'm not that thing, right? If I'm able to be aware of something else being depressed, that means I am not that depression. So if I'm not that depression, then what's going on here? And so even though I was depressed, even though I was an atheist, I was having these moments of higher awareness where I was like, something doesn't make sense. And around the peak of depression and around the peak of when I was questioning what was actually going on, that's when a certain book found me. But when I found this book, that was the first time in this lifetime that I came across the concept of Advaita. And it was the first time that I came across the story of Ramana Maharishi's life, and the fact that at a tender age of, I think it was 15 or 16, he attained self-realization. And he attained self-realization in the most incredible way, through self-inquiry. Okay, let's take a pause. I am getting way too excited right now because this topic, the nature of reality, who am I? What is the difference between me, the observable world, and God? I have just been yearning to create content on this, to be able to have conversations on this. So let's just take a step back for a moment. We've covered a few pretty big words so far, such as realizing the truth and self-realization. I've touched on the words Advaita Vedanta, and I've mentioned the name of this saint, Sri Ramana Maharishi. So I think we need to go a little bit deeper into each of these three things. So let's start with understanding Advaita Vedanta. I'm going to touch on it, and then we will definitely be diving deeper into Advaita Vedanta in other videos. Advaita Vedanta is a stream of Hindu philosophy. If you think about Hinduism, there are so many different pathways within Hinduism that any seeker can take in order to find their truth. And ultimately, almost every seeker in Hinduism is looking for the ultimate truth, self-realization, or what we like to call moksham, or basically the release of yourself from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Advaita Vedanta is one particular school or philosophy within Hinduism. Advaita. This is a Sanskrit word. Dvait means dual or two-ness. Means non. So Advaita basically means non-dual, non-two-ness. In this philosophy, there is no delineation or difference between you as the human being and God as a divine power and higher power. In fact, there is absolutely no duality at all. Everything is one. You are one with the world, and the world is one with God, and there is just one. There is just one consciousness. And as you work towards self-realization in the Advaita Vedanta path, what essentially you are doing is you are letting go of believing that you are separate from everything else. And the biggest way you let go of this illusion of separateness is to realize that you are not the body that you're in. You are not the mind or the personality that has formed. And if you are not these two things, then ultimately you basically experience super consciousness, super awareness. I found a really beautiful definition of this while I was Googling it, because words, I find it hard to put my understanding and my evolving understanding of Advaita Vedanta into words. But I really love this particular definition. Advaita Vedanta is a Hindu tradition which states that Jivatman, which is essentially the individual experiencing self, is ultimately pure awareness mistakenly identified with body and the senses. And therefore, it is non-different from Atman or Brahman, the highest self, God, divine consciousness, reality. I'm going to leave this there. I'm going to leave this to linger within you and to activate things within you. And I'm going to move on to Sri Ramana Maharishi. For me, I rediscovered Advaita Vedanta through Sri Ramana Maharishi. And for us to truly understand Advaita Vedanta, one must truly understand who Sri Ramana Maharishi is. So I literally found the exact book that started this journey for me, face to face with Sri Ramana Maharishi. And I'm now going to read out the exact excerpt or passage from this book that I read all those years ago. This is awesome. Okay, so Sri Ramana Maharishi is basically an enlightened saint who lived on Earth in the 20th century. And I'm just going to start reading this passage to you right now. Sometime in the middle of July 1896, when he was just 16 and a half years old, Venkatraman, which is basically Sri Ramana Maharishi's birth name, realized the self in a miraculous manner. Years later, he described the event himself in the following words. About 6 weeks before I left Madurai for good, a great change took place in my life. It was quite sudden. I was sitting alone in a room in my uncle's house when a sudden fear of death overtook me. There was nothing in my state of health to account for it. I just felt I'm going to die. And I began thinking about it. The fear of death drove my mind inwards, and I said to myself mentally, now that death has come, what does it mean? What is it that is dying? Only this body dies.
And at once I dramatized the occurrence of death. I held my breath and kept my lips tightly closed and said to myself, this body is dead. It will be carried to the cremation ground and reduced to ashes. But with the death of this body, am I dead? Is this body I? I am the spirit transcending the body. That means I am the deathless Atman. Atman means soul in Sanskrit. What happened next is difficult to comprehend, though easy to describe. Venkatraman seemed to fall into a profound conscious trance, wherein he became merged into the very source of selfhood, the very essence of being. He quite clearly perceived and imbibed the truth that the body was a thing apart from the Atman that remained untouched by death. Wow.
So he had this experience, this beautiful, profound experience. And when I read that story of how he attained self-realization, it awoke something in me. It awakened something in me. And I remember I was 15 or 16 and I started experimenting with this. Like I would lie down on the ground in Shavasana, which is a yoga asana, in which you lie down on the ground, and I would just visualize that I would just visualize that my body was dead, So I'd lie very, very still to the point where my breathing would just completely slow down, right? And then as I was lying there, I would ask myself, okay, so my body is dead, then who am I? If I'm not this body, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And I kept asking myself that. And that was probably my first out-of-body experience where something clicked in my mind and I realized, oh my God, like, this isn't it. Like, our experience of this world in this physical vessel, this is not it. It doesn't begin and end with this. There is an entire dimension beyond this that exists, and that's the metaphysical, and that is consciousness, and that's the super consciousness, and the energy of life and source and God, whatever you want to call it. And that was my first experience experiencing something beyond my physical body, something beyond my personality, beyond me, Amrita. And that started and laid the foundation for my spiritual journey. And very soon after that, I just completely committed to Advaita. I completely committed to Krishna, which I'll talk about in a different episode about Bhakti Yoga. And I completely fell in love with spirituality, because once you experience something like that, once you experience something greater than you, once you experience something beyond this physical form, it's like a beautiful nectar that you can't stop tasting, because that's the truth, right? You can't run away from that truth. That is the truth. And once you taste just a little bit of that truth, it pulls you in and you commit your life to it. And that is my story with spirituality and how I fell back into it. And I say fell back into it because I know that in previous lifetimes I've been on this journey and I've made progress on this journey, which means I was able to fall back into this at a very young age. And I'll share something really beautiful with you. This is, I would consider, the greatest achievement of my entire life. I thought that I would be able to visit Ramanasramam maybe when I was in my 50s, or maybe when I'm in my 60s, 70s, I'll be invited to Ramanasramam. I'll be able to be in the space that Ramana Maharishi meditated, be in the space where he had this ashram in Tiruvannamalai. I thought it would happen at a much older age for me, but it ended up happening to me end of last year at 34 years old. And to me, that is the biggest blessing of my life, is the fact that Ramana Maharishi invited me to Ramanasramam at 34. And that was just one of the most profound, it was the most profound experience of my life. And the moment I entered that ashram, my entire life shifted. It has taken on its own form. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that you're never too young to go down this journey. And fundamentally, the human spirit it's destined to soar towards the truth. Fundamentally, every single one of us wants that truth, wants to be one with that consciousness again. So just be open to it. Just be open to that knowledge entering your life. Just be open to experiences beyond this physical realm. Just be open to God. Just be open to the universe. Just be open to the metaphysical. And start questioning the things that don't make sense to you. I think that's where my spiritual journey began. If something happened in my life and I didn't fully understand it, I didn't just accept it. I didn't just go along with what people told me. I actively questioned things. Going back to when I had depression, it just didn't make sense to me. Everyone, like the way that whole experience was like, okay, you have depression because you are sad all the time. And I'm like, am I? Do I have depression? Or is it a part of me that has depression? And if a separate part of me has depression, that means I am not my depression, which means I am more than my depression. Who am I? Right? So keep questioning things. Don't be afraid of questioning everything. And always just seeking that truth. And the truth is something that you experience and you feel. You feel it in your gut. You feel it in your heart and your soul. Don't ever stop aligning to that truth. If something feels untrue to you, walk away from it. Whatever feels true to you, do that. Even if it goes against society, goes against your parents, right? It doesn't matter. We're here in this human lifetime to ascend, to transcend this physical form, and to move into the metaphysical, to become one again. So do whatever it takes to be true to this physical form and then to transcend this physical form. I hope that makes sense. I hope it was of value to you. If you haven't heard of Ramana Maharishi, I would encourage you to read about his life. Truly an inspiration. If you haven't been to Tiruvannamalai and gone to Ramanasramam, do that. It'll change the entire trajectory of your life. And if you're new to Advaita, go look into it online. It's going to blow your mind. But whatever it is, whatever your form of spirituality is, don't settle. Don't settle for just the material. Go deep. Use this lifetime to figure out who you really are and why you're really here. And I promise you that will be the most beautiful, fulfilling use of your life as a human. I love you. And I look forward to connecting with you again in the next episode. Thank you for giving me this space to talk about all the things that I love. See you next time.